For Tov, today's daf yomi is Shevuos daf Yud Ches Shevuos 18. We're going to start on the bottom of Yud Zayin Amud Beis 17b. On 8 lines from the bottom, today's daf yomi is dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim Atzal for the Shvuyim and the Yeshua for Am Yisrael. So the Gemara tells us we're talking about a case or a person is with his wife, and then she says while she's with him that she is Tamea, that she became a Nida. So the Talmud had said that halacha is he's supposed to calm himself down and only then release himself from her, but not before that. So Imar Abaya Amar Mishmei Rav Chiya bar Rav, and if he's with her and then he leaves without calming himself down, Chayav Shtayim, he's liable for two sin offerings. So Chayin Amar Rav, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Shava, Amar Rabbi Amar Rafuna Chayav Shtayim. He's going to be liable for two. Chada Knisa, one in which for being with her in the first place, Chada Prisha, and one for separating because he was supposed to calm himself down. Now the Knisa, he's only liable if it was not directly Samach Vest, if it wasn't like within, at this point, within the hour of where she was expecting the exact moment of her Nida, because if it was that, it was only if it was only samach vest, but if it was more than that, it would be an ones. It would be a total accident. And if he knew for sure she was in Nida, then it's amazing. So in either of those cases, he wouldn't bring a chata. So it's a sin offering. It's only if it's right before she was supposed to have her Nida. And so then we're going to say under those circumstances, he would bring the chatas. Chada knisa, chada risha, hava bay rava, or rabba. The Gemara has different versions. Yaivit says it's rava. It says b'mai. What are we talking about? Ilema samach vesta. If we say it's right before her vest, ukaman, and who is it like? Ilema. Who's it? Ubaman. Who are we talking about? Ilema b'talmud chacham. If you want to say it's a Torah scholar. Well, Bishlam Knisa Chayev. Well, it makes sense to say the Torah scholar is liable for the Knisa because Savar Yecholoni Livol, because he thought he was allowed to be with her at that point, and he would separate himself before she saw. So that's why he's liable for a sin offering. But why is he liable for the prisha? Mazid who? He knows that he's a Torah scholar. He knows he's not allowed to leave. So it's mazid. So he shouldn't have to bring a chatas for a purposeful sin offering. You don't bring a chatas if you did it on purpose. So therefore, the Gemara says on top of Yuchas Amad Aleph, Rabbi continues, Viba Amaretz, and if it's a person who doesn't know better, it's like you eat two olives with one forgetting. You did two sins, but he didn't know in between, and so therefore he's just liable for being with a woman who's in nida, and he shouldn't bring two chatas, but one chatas. So you want to say, well, maybe it's not near the vest, so it was within that hour, and here, who are we talking about? The Torah scholar wouldn't even be liable for one, not for being with her in the first place. He's the total accident, and Prisha made it, and not for the separation, because that was intentional. And Iba Amma Aretz, and if it would be a non-Kohen, non-Torah scholar, he would only be liable for one, Prisha, on the departure from her, on the release from her, but not on being with her in the first place, because that's a total accident. No, it's talking about right before her vest. And so therefore he has to bring a chatas on being with her, but not a chatas on leaving her with the Talmud Chacham. The Talmud Chacham lazu, vein Talmud Chacham lazu. But he does, because he doesn't know the halacha that he has to calm himself down before leaving her. It says Gemara Amarava v'Travayu. Good morning, Hobbs. How are you doing today? Baruch Hashem. We're on 18a at the top. 18a at the top. Around 1 to the 8 lines from the top. The Gemara said if a man is with a woman and then he finds out in the middle that she is Anida, and he leaves without first calming himself down, he's going to be liable for two chatas, one on the Kenisa and one on the Parisha. And the Gemara explained that the assumption that what's the Ukimta, we're talking about a Torah scholar, and so it was really right next to when she became a Nida, was Samach Vest, when she was expecting. And the Prisha, he didn't realize he wasn't a Torah scholar for the Prisha. He was only Torah scholar as it relates to the laws of the Knisa. And now Rava says, V'travayu Taninu, both of these statements are learned already in the Mishnah, says Rava. They're explicit in Mishnayos. How do we know this? Knisa Tanina and Prisha Tanina. We learned about the law of that if he's with her, he brings a sin offering and Prisha Tanina, and also that if he leaves without first calming himself down, we also learned that. The Katane, because it states, we learned in our Mishnah here on Yudalad Amabez, Tahora, if he's with his wife and he thinks she's Tahora, Va'amrolo, and she says to him, Nitmesi, she says, actually, now I'm now on Nida, Upiresh Miyad, and he leaves immediately, Chayev. So therefore, we see from here that on the Prisha is liable for a Chatos. And Tanina, and Kanisa Tanina, and we also know that he's liable if he's with her, and then she says she's a Nida. Nimtzal Shalo, that if after he's with her, he looks at his cloth, which he cleans himself with, and he says he finds blood on his cloth. Tamein, so they're both going to be tamei, the carbon, and they both have to bring a carbon. Chatas for being with a woman who's in need. My love, aren't we talking about a case? Aren't we talking about our kimta, where it was near where the time where she was expecting her vest, her period, and he therefore has to bring a sin offering for being with her in the first place. And so isn't that exactly what we're talking about here? No, it's even possible the case where he was with her, but it was not samach vest. So that will be a total onus. So why would he have to bring a carbon? The aprisha. He's bringing the carbon for leaving her without first calming himself down. And if you want to say, why does the Mishnah need to tell us about a prisha? We already know this case of the prisha because it's from our Mishnah. So the Gemara says, no, itzdrach lashmiina, and it needs to tell us nimtza al shalah, itzdrach lashmiina nimtza al shalah tmeim. So it's to teach us this idea nimtza al shalah, that if the blood was found on her cloth, Tmei and Besafik, both of them are going to be Safik, Uptur Minat Karban, meaning to say this law, our Mishnah. So it needs to. So the reason why it needs to teach us the law is that if it's found on his cloth, they have to bring a chatas. But if it was found on her cloth, they're both going to be tamei only from a safek, because we don't know for sure if she became a tamei while he was with her or after the fact, and they're both exempt from a carbon. So since the Mishnah has to teach us the law from the end of that Mishnah, which is if it was found on her cloth, it teaches us nimtzal shalo, even though that was the case of Prisha, which was already taught to us in our Mishnah over here. Can you really say that Mishnah Nida is talking about where the blood was found on her cloth, and it was right before the vest, and we're saying that she's not, that they don't bring a carbon because it's a doubt that what it's talking about, the prisha, and therefore that they're going to say that they're liable on the prisha. But if it was if it was shlo samach vest, if it was not next to her vest, then we're going to say they're not liable for that. But he's liable on the case of prisha because he found it on his blood. Is that on his cloth? Is that really what that Mishnah is talking about? That it's referring to a case that was not near the vest, and it's on the prisha. On nimtza katani, it says that he discovered it. So he discovered it on the cloth. So it's obviously not on the prisha. Nimtza implies after he already released himself from her. Via prisha. Meikara kipar shla, and meikara avoyadia. And if it's the prisha, if that's what it's referring to, when he released himself from her, he knew he had yadia, not that he found it on the cloth. So this is what Rav Ada says to Rava. So after Rava hears this, Amar Ravina or Rav Ada. So after he hears this, Ravina said this to Rav Ada. So after Rava hears this, Amar Rava, Rava says to Rava that Tzayis Mandika Amar Rabbeich. He says, listen to what your Rebbe Ravina says to you, that you can't say that our Mishnah is talking about the Prisha. And so it must be that our Mishnah that is to tell us that both of them are liable on the Kenisa. So Amrullah Heichi Matzis. So how can you say that our Mishnah is that he's liable on the Kenisa? How are you able to explain it? Tanya, because we learned in the Brisa, Zui mitzvah asay shebenida shechayiv enoya. It says in the Brisa, this is the positive commandment of a nida, in which case the Bezdin, if they told them the mistaken ruling, they'll have to bring a parallel to Shel Tibor. Vim Isa, and if you're correct that it's liable on the Kenisa, then mitzvahs lo sasehi. Meaning to say, how can you say that you're liable on the Prisha, that's what it's referring to? Because it said in the Brisa, this is the positive commandment which you're liable, which the Bezdin, if they make a mistake, has to bring a carbon. But this is a lo saseh, that he's not allowed to be with her in the first place. It's not the mitzvah of separating from her. So Amalei, so Rava says, Itanise, if you learned this Brisa, you have to amend the text of the Brisa. You have to amend it. And how do you have to amend it to read? You have to amend it to say, Zui mitzvahs lo saseh shebenida shechayav. This Mishnah is referring to a lo saseh of nida, that you're liable. That if he was with this tahora, actually, we're not talking about a bezin parallel Mishal Tzibur. We're just talking about them being liable. And our Mishnah here in Shevuos, it's about a parallel never Mishal Tzibur. But this is just they themselves. It says this is the mitzvah and or maybe it's a parallel of Mishal Tzibur. Let's see what Rashi says. It's not clear to me. It's not. Hold on one second. I assume it's not necessarily talking about parallel never shall tzibor, but it could be. So, and then it amends the text. It says this is the los say shebenida that they're liable for. And that is the mitzvah to say shebenida. So if he was with her when he wasn't allowed to, that's the los to say. But if he didn't separate properly, that is the essay. So we just amend the text. Amar Mar, so now it's analyzed the statement. It says Piresh Miyad, if he's with his wife and then she says she's Tameh, and then he immediately leaves, Piresh Miyad Chayev. So Hechayav, what is he supposed to do? Amar Rafuna Mishmei Derav. So Rafuna says in the name of now he changed it back to Mishmei Derav. So Rafuna says in the name of Rav, no it's Eser Tzi Parno Bekarka, Ad Sheyamus Vituve. He should stick his fingernails into the ground, meaning to say he basically hold himself up on the basis of his fingers and without continuing to engage until his aver, until he basically calms himself down. And then only to those circumstances is he supposed to relieve himself from her vituve. And then it is fortunate from him. This is a blessing for him that if he's able to do that, he has a self-control to be able to do that. Good morning, Jeff. We're Baruch Hashem on the bottom of 18a, around 8 lines from the bottom. And Amar Rabba, again, here we have to amend the text that we were saying Amar Rabba. So we just said, Zos Tameris HaMashamish Meis Barayis Potter. We see from here that if a person violates the prohibition of being with a woman who he's not allowed to be with, but his aver is mace, meaning he's not excited, then he's going to be exempt. The Isakadai Tachayev, if you're going to say he's liable, in that case, time a potter. Why would you say he's exempt here? If you want to say it's Mishum Da'anasu, he's exempt from a carbon because he had no ability to know about it as a total accident. Well, Anasu, Kipirish Miyan Namin after. Well, if he's totally out of his control, then when he leaves, when he releases himself, even if he was still excited, he should be exempt. So therefore, it must be that if the aver is mace, you're not liable. So I'm like, no, I could always tell you that if you're mishamish with aver that's mace, that you're still liable. What's the reason he's potter? Mishum to anasu. He's anus. Well, if that's the case, if he released himself immediately, why would he be liable? Because he could have diminished his joy by releasing himself with less pleasure, but since he released himself with more pleasure, for that reason he's going to be liable. So Amalei Rabbi Bar Chanan Abaye. So Rabbi Bar Chanan says Abaye came at Sino Aruko Kutsara Benida Vanan B'Mikdash Tanan. So the Gemara had said, the Gemara's question here is, or this is the question of Rabbi Bar Chanan Abaye. Our Mishnah had said that we have a case where it's in Aruka Derech, where our Mishnah said that if you discover your Tameh in the Mikdash and you go out the longer way, you're liable. You have to go out the shorter way. And it said in our Mishnah that this is the case of what was the exact language of the Mishnah? The exact language of the Mishnah is that Imbalo Baruch Chayev Biktar Pater Zui Mitzvah say Sheba Mikdash Shein Chayev in Aleha. That this is the example. But this is not the only example, because we also have the example of Nida, that if he went in the longer way out, then there's a shorter way to go out and a longer way to go out. And if he went out the wrong way, he's liable. So it should have listed also the case of the Nida. So the Gemara says, yeah, because they're totally the opposite. They're opposites, actually. And Bishum Delo Dami, Aruka Da'acha, Ktsar Da'asam, Aruka Da'asam, Ktsar Da'acha. In the case of the Mikdash, if you went the longer way out, then you're going to be liable. The shorter way, you're exempt. But in the case of the Nida, if you released yourself in the longer manner, right, after you calm down, then you're going to be potter. If you went in the shorter manner, then you're going to be liable. So that's why it didn't list that example. So Maske for Rafuna Berei Rav Nasan, Mi Amar Abaye on Asu, Alma Bishlo Samachavesta coming in. Does Abaye really say, because we had said on the previous page that it says that the reason why he's potter is because he's in Anus, that he's exempt, even though he's with an Aver Mace, because he's in Anus. Does Abaye really want to say it's a total accident? So it must be that he was nowhere near the time where she was expecting her vest, where she was expecting her period. So Abaye the Amar Chayev Shtaim, Abaye says that if it that Abaye had said that he's liable in this case of the Mishnah for two, one for the Knisa and one for the Prisha, one for being with her and one for not being with her. And it must be that it was right near where she was expecting her vest, because otherwise it would be a total accident. So Kiyit Mar de Abaye, so the Gemara says, no, when Abaye says this ruling, Ba'alma Itmar, when Abaye says you're liable for two, he wasn't referring directly to our Mishnah, because our Mishnah is talking about, draws a distinction between the two cases. Abaye was just giving a general thing that you could be liable for the Kanisa, you could be liable for Prisha, not necessarily in that specific case, because really in that case, you would be, if you were a total anus, then we're going to say that you're not liable. So therefore, he's talking about a case that he's talking about in general. You're liable for the Kanisa if you were with her, Sama Chavesta, and she said she's Tameya, and you're liable for the Prisha if he didn't separate in the proper manner. So the Gemara says, Bamine, hold on one second. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Bamine Rabbi Yosam ben Yossi ben Lukunya, mi Rabbi Shimon ben Yossi ben Lukunya. Ashara labol nida minayin min Torah. How do we know that you're not allowed to be with a nida? Where is there a warning about this from the Torah? Ashara labol nida min Torah minayin. So Shakal Kala, when he asked this question to Rabbi Shimon ben Yossi ben Lukunya, he took up and Shakal Kala Pasak Bay. He took up a clod of earth and he threw it at him. He took up a clod of earth and he threw it at him. Hasar Nida? What do you mean asking me a question about a warning against being with a Nida woman? What are you even talking about? It says in the pasuk, Isha b'nidas to masalo tikrav. You're not allowed to be with a woman who's a nida. Ela azara mishamish tahora va'amra lonit mesi delonit farish miyad minon. No, I'm asking about it. The case that we discussed on Yud Zayin Amabez, where that a person uh, is with his wife, and then she says she's Torah, but then in the middle she says she's Tameya, and he shouldn't release himself immediately. How do we know that that is a prohibition from the Torah? Amar Chizkiya, Amar Kra, Utehi Nidasa Allah, that the Nida should be upon him. Then I feel B'shas Nidasa Tehei Allah. Even when she's in Nida, there's a circumstance where she has to be with him, and that's where she discovers in the middle, and then he has to wait for her he has to wait to calm himself down. Ashkhan Asay, okay, we find that it's a positive commandment that he's supposed to calm himself down. Lo sasemi now, and how do we know that he can't leave immediately? Amar Papa, Amar Kra, lo tikrav, and lo tikrav nami lo tifroshu. The word lo tikrav that it says about a nida also means do not separate. Diksiv haomrim krav elecha al tigashpi ki kidashticha, because it says in Isaiah, those who say come close to you, al tigashpi ki kidashticha. It means don't come close to me, because I have sanctified you. So there the pasuk means to say don't separate. There the pasuk means the word, the cynics of the generation of Isaiah used to say to the prophet Isaiah, stand where you are and don't touch me, so that I won't not make you tamei by touching, because you're kadosh and I'm tamei. So we see from here that the word karav means separate, means stand where you are. Karav stand where you are. Al tigashbi kiki dashticha. Don't be, because you're holy. I don't want to touch you. So stand where you are. Tan Rabbanan these are temes b'nei Yisrael mitumasam, and it says the hizartem es b'nei, meaning you shall separate the children of Israel from their tumah. Am Rabbi Yoshaya mikana azar b'nei Yisrael sheyifreshu min ishosein samach avestan the kama amaraba ona. So okay, what does this mean? That this is a warning that the children of Israel need to separate from their wives near their vest. And how much is this in Ona? So this word samach ves near the period is not the same as at the beginning of our sugya. The beginning of our sugya meant within the hour, because in the time of the Talmud the women knew exactly when they were going to have their period. But now it means samach ves done here means either the day or the nighttime where she was expecting it. It's a 12-hour period. That's what Ona Rashi says. V'mesechas nida mufurash o yom olayla, either a day or a night. Invest b'yom yifrosh kol yom. If her vest is that day, she has to separate the whole day. V'invest b'layla, and if she's expecting a period that night, yifrosh kol olayla. And then she has to separate the whole night. And that's the way most people paskin, that you have to separate Ona samach vesta. Some say it's a 24-hour period, but not everybody says you have to be strict for that. Whoever does not separate from his wife in this Ona period, even if he has children like Aaron, Mason, then Rahman al-San, the children will die. Because it says in the pasuk, you have to warn the people about their tumah, and it says v'hadava b'nidasa. And it says the woman who has her flow, and then right after that, Acharei Mos, it talks about the death of the sons of Aaron. Amalei Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So it says Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, called Porish Nishta Samach Besto, Ivan Lo Banim Zacharim. Whoever separates from their wife near the vest will have male children. D'chsiv Avdil Bein Tamei Uvein Tahar, to distinguish between the Tamei and the Tahar. Then it says right next to it, the pasuk says that she gives birth to a male. If you separate from your wife, then this Veset, you're going to have children who are capable of teaching the halacha. Because it says in the pasuk there, so now, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So since we're talking about having banim zacharim or children, male children or children who are capable of giving a halacha, then Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, "Name Rabbi Yochanan call him Abdul Yayin b'Motzei Shabbos." Whoever makes avdol on wine on Motzei Shabbos, meaning he doesn't use orange juice, he doesn't use beer, he uses the Bari Pregafen. Then Havil banim zacharim, he's going to have male children. D'chsiv avdil bein hakodesh ubein hachol. V'ksiv avdil bein hatamei ubein hatar. The samachay right next to that it says isha kitazriya. So if you use the proper thing for Havdalah, you're going to have children who are male children, which is what they're going for. Amr, yeah. The male is the aggressive. That it's not literal. It means you have children who accomplish. Shkoyach. Jeff has added that it doesn't necessarily mean male children according to the Chasam so far. Or the other way to read it is it's not sufficient male children because you got plenty of male children who are not good. So it means that you have children who are accomplished. Rabbi Yeshua Levi Amar Banim Ru'il Ora Delsiv Abdil Rose. Amar, hold on, hold on. Okay, so now it says in the pasuk. Okay, hold on. So okay. Really, this is the. We're going to stop the recording here, but I'll continue doing the daf with you because really this is a new sugya. So